What I refer to as dividend freedom, or generating enough dividend income to never have to work again, is an escape strategy that is gaining popularity by the day. Believe it or not, it's easier to achieve dividend freedom than most people think. So let me tell you what your minimum investment would need to be to accomplish that. But before we get deeper, if you're new to this channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. So without further ado, let's get started. One of the saddest forms of existence is having to trade the majority of your life at a job you dislike for a wage that barely keeps the lights on. Call me a dreamer, but I think that life is about more than just being productive, especially when it's to making everyone but yourself rich. Sadly, most people are living the life I just described, and you might be too. Once you receive one paycheck, the novelty wears off, and all you're left with is often a bunch of mundane work and days that seem to extend longer and longer over time. At first, I thought it was just the people I was working with. They were unhappy. I mean, if most people weren't happy at their jobs, why didn't they just leave? Well, I soon came to learn that when you look at the hard numbers, people's discontent at their jobs is more prominent than I could ever have imagined. As per a 2019 Gallup study, 52% of people are not engaged at work. Another Gallup asked respondents about the state of their working conditions, and about 40% said that the quality of their position had worsened. What's worse is that as much as people are barely tolerating their current jobs, in many situations, their overall work experiences seem to only get worse. Happily, there is a fix for these deteriorating working conditions, and that fix is to live off dividends. If you ask me, living off dividends is the pinnacle of financial freedom. The only thing that needs to be done, in contrast to many other passive investments with dividends, is to sit back, unwind, and cash your checks as they arrive. Unfortunately, despite being a dream for the majority of people, this lifestyle will always be just a dream because so few people will never fully rely on their dividend income. How come? I'll explain. The majority of people won't become a dividend-free for three reasons. First of all, individuals like you and I have been familiar with dividend investing for a while, but we do not represent the majority of investors. Only 56% of Americans own any stock, which supports the idea that fewer people are familiar with the dividend freedom lifestyle than you might think. The second factor preventing most people from ever being able to live off dividends is that they simply do not earn and save enough money to begin accumulating funds for such an ambitious financial goal. In fact, according to recent 2021 reports, more than 50% of Americans are still making ends meet. You'll probably agree that it would be difficult to survive off of dividends if you didn't have the money to begin with. Last but not least, some people find it impossible to overcome the challenge of building a dividend portfolio large enough to support their goals of dividend freedom. Let's examine how much the typical investor would need to invest to begin living a life free from debt. To put this into perspective, the average cost of living in the US was about $60,000 as of late 2021. Today's most dependable dividend ETFs provide a yield of about 2.5% yearly. To give 2 weeks notice at work and begin living a life of dividend freedom, one would need to have $2.4 million on hand based on this cost of the living estimate. In contrast, the typical household saves $65,000 for retirement, and as you can see, the majority of people are a long way from being able to quit their 9-to-5 jobs thanks to dividend investing. I know what you're thinking though. Why not just put money into assets that will yield higher returns? Naturally, this also means that you're earning more in dividend income each year. For instance, there are stocks like IBM that offer an annual yield of roughly 5% to 5% and just so happen to be on the list of dividend aristocrats. Your investment portfolio would need to be worth $1.2 million to support a $60,000 per year lifestyle. Compared to our previous example, this represents a significant reduction in the holdings needed to achieve dividend freedom. The logical next step would be to keep looking for stocks that yield increasing dividends. Many businesses will try to entice investors with a high dividend yield to fund their cash-efficient operations. You might be taken aback if these high-paying companies suddenly cut their dividends or go out of business. Relying on even 7 of the most dependable dividend stocks has occasionally turned out to be risky. For instance, AT&T, one of the most well-known dividend stocks, announced at the beginning of 2022 that investors could anticipate seeing a dividend cut in half as it underwent organizational restructuring. This means that in your quest for complete dividend freedom, even the most dependable dividend stocks may let you down. You might be thinking at this point that your chances of ever making a living of dividends are about the same as mine of ever finding a match on Tinder. Achieving success and eventually being able to live off dividends simply requires optimizing your cost of living and, as I just mentioned, your dividend yield. It is entirely up to you whether you want to make $20,000 a year or $50,000 per year at a dividend yield of 2.5%. This will have a significant impact on the amount of money you need to start saving for dividend support. You could avoid saving up $400,000 in your portfolio, which would take most people years to do, by cutting your annual living expenses by $10,000. Just now, we discussed how investing in a single business can be both profitable and risky. Let's face it, you want to spend the majority of your time after work on your investing app, hoping for good news about the one company that will prevent you from having to find new employment. When you start investing, you should diversify rather than bet everything on a single stock. However, this diversification must be accompanied by adequate returns. It is at this point that the majority of people's dividend problems are resolved. Consider covered call ETFs if you want to combine diversification and high yields. I don't mean the collection calls from your friends asking you to pick them up from the police station when I say cover calls. Cover call exchange traded funds are funds that buy a set of stocks and write call options on them. The nice thing about investing in a covered ETF is that investors benefit from covered calls without directly participating in the options market on their own. The fund takes care of the covered calls for them, making this process hands-off. You might be wondering what kind of returns you can anticipate from this kind of fund, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Popular cover call ETFs like the Global X Nasdaq 100 Cover Call ETF or the QYLD have an annual yield of 11.8%. To start living off dividends, you will need to have just over $500,000 invested. Regarding diversification, you might be thinking that this is still a sizable sum of money to have invested in a single asset, and that is accurate. But this fund is spread out among many incredibly reliable businesses, including Apple, Tesla, and Google. In contrast to our AT&T example, you are dispersing your dividend freedom across several successful companies. The best part is that opening your brokerage account tomorrow and depositing $500,000 is not a gift. It is more than possible to gradually increase your investment in this fund to make this investment strategy successful, and then use the dividend income it generates to increase your position. In actuality, this is how the majority of sizable dividend portfolios are constructed. However, in this instance, the amount required for you to be entirely dependent on dividend income is much more doable. However, even at $500,000, there will be plenty of people who are unable to imagine amassing such wealth. As a result, I wanted to offer one more option. When you stop to think about it, the main advantage of living off dividend income is that you will have complete time freedom and no longer have to worry about paying your bills. The creation of an automated online business is, fortunately, another way to achieve the same lifestyle without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. You ought to be aware by now that the internet is more than just a collection of amusing cat videos. The internet offers a way to create online assets that can earn you a handsome monthly income. And in my opinion, this is the best way for the majority of people to avoid working shortly. I know that the idea of relying solely on income from the internet to support oneself without having to work seems radical, and I shared that opinion before realizing it for myself. I can run my YouTube channels non-stop and still make enough money to cover my expenses without working. And the same lifestyle can be attained using a variety of well-known online business models, including dropshipping, blogging, and drop servicing. There is no chance that starting this kind of online business will be free, right? You might be surprised to learn that you can start a six-figure online passive income business with zero capital and get to the point of financial independence much sooner than you might have imagined.
And that's it for this video. Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell for more videos like this. Thanks for watching and see you next time.